You are listening to Glass Lake, written by Lisa Marie Stevenson, narrated by Lulu Soul. Why my mom had chosen to move here was still a mystery to me. There wasn't anything good about Goodnight, Missouri. In my eyes, the town dripped with boredom. With a population of 388, Goodnight wasn't big enough to have its own movie theater or any of the other hangouts I was accustomed to. Everyone knew everyone, except for us, of course. I felt like a circus freak every time I stepped out of the apartment. Our neighbors had obviously not been taught the significance of manners, and the constant stares got on my last nerve. Even with the minute population, I was bound to run into someone every single time I left the apartment. It was the price you paid for living in a town less than 1 square mile, with all the stores and houses pressed in so close together. Again, I questioned my mom's sanity as I rounded the corner to the general store. "Milk and eggs," she had said. I begged her to let me take the car. But, of course, she had said no. It wasn't like she let me do anything other than the occasional grocery run. It didn't matter that the high today was only going to reach 34 degrees, barely above freezing. "This town's so small you could spit across it," she had told me, throwing my own words back in my face. "You can walk," I mumbled to myself as I hugged my arms tightly against my chest, thankful that my long red hair provided some barrier to the cold as it cascaded around my shoulders. If I thought this was bad, wait until I had to carry the milk. I dreaded the feel of the cold handle in my grip. "Gray Dawson, right?" I heard as a figure sprinted up beside me. I turned around and regarded the first delightful thing I had seen since arriving a week before. He looked to be about my age, with wavy dark hair that stopped short of his shoulders. His deep brown eyes appraised me as he waited. Maybe this place wasn't such a dump after all. "Yeah, I'm Gray. And you are?" "Jaden Thompson," he said, putting his hand out to shake mine. It confused me a little. Most of the teenage boys I knew back home were not into shaking your hand. That was something I thought was reserved for stuffy old men with professions such as doctors and lawyers. Maybe it was considered normal in a small town? I reached out and took his hand, and momentarily forgot about the frigid cold around me. The feel of his hand against mine was warm, which matched the sensation that began to stir in the pit of my stomach. He grinned, and I realized I was still holding his hand. My face must have turned at least 10 different shades of red as I let go. "So, how do you like Goodnight?" Better now, I thought, but bit my lip as I considered my answer. "It takes some getting used to," I said politely. "That's one way of putting it." He laughed as if he was only too aware of what I was really thinking. "Have you lived here long?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I was born here." No wonder he had seemed so ecstatic to introduce himself. If I lived here all my life, I would have jumped at any opportunity to see something new. Despite his good looks, I pitied him. "I'm sorry." He laughed a deep, throaty laugh. "It's not that bad once you get used to it. I was afraid you might be ready to throw yourself from the Dantzler Bridge any day now. So, I thought I should let you know there's still hope." "There's a bridge I can throw myself from? I wish someone would have told me sooner," I said lightheartedly, and he grinned. "I'm glad they didn't." He looked down the sidewalk in front of us. "So, where are you headed?" "To Buck's. I have to get a few things for my mom." "When you're finished, I'd like to show you what's so unique about Goodnight." Well, this I had to see. "Do you mind if I tag along with you?" "Sure." I shrugged my shoulders indifferently while on the inside I was leaping for joy. Goodnight was looking better and better. When we finally reached the entrance to my apartment 20 minutes later, He seemed to sense my hesitation and handed me the milk he had been gracious enough to carry. "I'll wait out here." "That's probably a good idea," I agreed. "My mom can be a little overdramatic at times." That was putting it mildly. But there was no need for Jaden to know how crazy my mom could be. I opened the door and took the groceries inside. A few minutes later, after barely managing to convince my mom that I wanted to go for another walk, after having just complained about it earlier, I emerged to find Jaden waiting patiently for me. "So, where are we going?" "You'll see," he said with a wink and grabbed my hand, taking the lead. For a moment, I wondered if I was as crazy as my mom. Here, I had just met Jaden, and now I was running off with him to God only knows where. I became more uneasy as the houses and shops faded behind us. A patch of dense trees loomed before us, their outstretched limbs blanketed in snow. The trees seemed to beckon to me, and it was then that I spotted the path of packed down snow that ran in between the trees and disappeared over a small grade. Instead of feeling apprehensive, I felt relaxed, as though I had been here before. "I feel like I've known you all my life, or at least part of it. I'm sure you have no idea what I'm talking about, but you will." For the first time, Jaden acted a little unsure of himself. Undoubtedly, my silence troubled him. I frowned when Jaden came to a stop on the outskirts of a frozen lake. There wasn't a shelter in sight other than the covered dock that extended out over the ice. "Where are we?" "Glass Lake," he answered, and I hesitated when he pulled me towards the dock. "Trust me, I want to tell you a story." I eased behind him as we walked out onto the boardwalk, and soon forgot about the cold. The ice seemed to sparkle and dance before my eyes, and I was lost in its undeniable beauty. It caught me off guard when Jaden started talking again. "I used to think it was only a myth, or that I was crazy. Until I saw you." I cocked my head to the side, unsure of what he was going on about. "What myth?" "The story of Glass Lake. The whole reason that Good Night got its name." "I never knew there was a reason." "Everything has a name for a reason," he insisted, and I felt lost in the intensity of his eyes when he turned to face me. "It's actually a Cherokee legend. My grandfather told it to me when I was 13. My father had just died, and I was lost without him. I distanced myself from everyone I knew. I didn't even stop to think about how my behavior might affect my mother or the rest of my family." I swallowed. It was almost as if Jaden was describing my own life. It brought to mind the many hurtful things I had said to my mom since my own dad had passed away. I hadn't even stopped to consider what she was going through. I think my grandfather knew exactly what he was doing when he told me the story of Atoyi and Noya. I needed to know that my life wasn't going to stop because my father was gone. I still had my whole life ahead of me. I remember my grandfather's words as if it was only yesterday. Atoyi and Noya were young and in love. They longed for the day when they would wed. Cherokee marriage required the groom present a ham of venison to the bride, symbolizing his intention to provide for her. The bride would in turn give the groom an ear of corn. Her gift symbolized her intention to care for and nourish their family. Corn was plentiful that year, and Noya would have no problem with her end of the ceremony. But poor Toyi was a bad hunter. Determined not to let Noya down, Atoyi set out early one morning and vowed not to return until he had taken a deer. 3 days passed, and Noya worried that something had happened to her beloved Atoyi. Noya knew that her people had recently captured a Shawnee medicine man. As was their custom with prisoners of war, the medicine man had been tied to a pole in the center of the village and left to die. He claimed to have the ability to see the future and tried to bargain for his release, but her tribe had refused. One night, Noya, still worried about Otoyi, snuck out to see the medicine man. She begged him to tell her what the future held for her and Otoyi. The medicine man told Noya that if he granted her request, she must set him free or risk the same fate as he. Without even thinking twice, she agreed. The medicine man told Noya to go to sleep with something dear to her placed under her pillow. As soon as she woke the next morning, she was to go to the lake and cast her treasure in. Her future would be revealed in the ripples of the water. The medicine man cautioned her not to retrieve the item again, but to leave it in the depths of the water forever. Noya did as the medicine man told her. At night, she took a necklace that Otoyi had made for her and put it under her pillow. The next morning, when she cast the necklace into the lake, she saw her and Otoyi making love under the light of a full moon. At first, she was ecstatic at the vision, knowing that Otoyi would be successful and they would soon wed. However, she began to second-guess her decision to simply cast her cherished keepsake into the water, and worried that Otoyi would be upset with her. Disregarding what the Shawnee medicine man told her, she dove in after it. It took Noya a while, but she was finally able to retrieve the necklace. When she returned to the medicine man to thank him, she found he had died in his sleep while she had been searching for the necklace. That evening, Otoyi returned with the ham of venison. Not wanting to wait a second longer, they wed and made love under the light of a full moon, just as she had witnessed in the water. After kissing Noya, Otoyi stroked the hair of his beautiful bride and wished her good night. His words were the last she would ever hear. That night, like the medicine man, she too died in her sleep. At first, I stood there mesmerized by his story as I looked out over the frozen lake. There would be no ripples in the water any time soon. I looked up at Jaden uncertainly. I don't understand. I thought you were going to tell me a story of hope. That story is the saddest thing I've ever heard. It is sad, but the legend has it that you can do the same thing that Noya did and see your future. You have to remember that once you give your treasure up, you can never get it back. When I was a little boy, my father gave me a watch. I never took it off. I even slept with it on. After my grandfather told me the story of Noya and Otoyi, I decided to take a risk. I imagine even he knew it was more than a story. After sleeping with my father's watch under my pillow, I threw it into Glass Lake. Did it work? I asked, and he nodded. What did you see? I saw you. At first, I didn't know if it was simply the most ingenious pickup line known to man, or if there really was such a thing as magic. Looking into Jaden's eyes, I confirmed what I had already known. There was. He squeezed my hand as if he could read my mind. But I guess we should head back now, he said, ending the awkward silence. I would hate for your mother to get worried. It's probably too late for that, but you're right. We should head back. He never let go of my hand until we finally reached the steps to my apartment. I couldn't say that I minded. It was strange. It was as if I had known him for weeks instead of merely hours. I'll see you tomorrow? He asked as if he was unsure once again. Maybe he thought his forwardness would scare me away. If it had been anyone else, it would have. I'd like that. He squeezed my hand one last time, and I watched as he continued down the sidewalk. When I walked back into the apartment, I wasn't surprised to find my mom in the kitchen, stirring batter to what I could only assume was the start of my birthday cake. Turning 17 should have been a joyous occasion, but it wasn't. Even a birthday cake couldn't change that, but at least she was trying. That was more than I could say for myself lately. I hadn't really looked at my mom. I mean, really looked at her in such a long time. Seeing her now, I could tell that she had aged considerably in the last year, and I felt a twinge of guilt. Surely, I was partially responsible. Why did you move to Goodnight? I asked before I could stop myself. My mom quit stirring and looked down at her hands, which trembled ever so slightly. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Before, I would have let her get away with that answer. But now I was paying attention. Focusing on her hands, I knew there was more. Mom, I'm sorry. She looked up at me in surprise. For what? For not being there when you needed me? For making it tougher on you? The corners of her lips turned up slightly. Gray, she started. You don't need to apologize. Losing your father was hard. Still is. But you lost him too. At your age, I never had to deal with anything like that. We have to keep putting one foot in front of the other and remembering that we have each other. She pulled me into her arms, and I fought to keep the tears back. The last thing I wanted to do was break down in front of her. She pulled back and smiled. I love you, Gray. You have to know that. I do. I love you too, Mom. I hesitated, not wanting to hurt her anymore, but what I wanted to know was somehow important. So why did you really move here? I asked, and she sighed. She sat down at the small round table that centered the kitchen before finally looking up at me. I wanted to get as far away from the memories of your dad as I could. Everything back home reminded me of him, and one night, I had a dream about this town. Imagine my surprise when I looked it up and it was real. I never told you why because it didn't make sense, even to me. I still don't know if it was the right decision. Would it help if I told you it was? My mom looked at me as if I had gone off the deep end. Who are you? And what have you done with my daughter? I smiled. I think this town is growing on me. She tilted her head to the side as she chewed on her bottom lip. So, that was where I got it from. Would a boy have anything to do with your change of heart? Now, why would you think that? I asked, hoping my expression didn't give it away. My mom always had a knack for knowing exactly what I was thinking. Answering a question with a question, so you don't deny it. My mother was quicker than I had given her credit for. I may have made a friend today. That's a boy. Yes. I couldn't help but smile. At least she didn't seem upset by this revelation, only curious. You know I'll have to meet him. At least that way he can come in next time, instead of you risking your extremities out in the cold again. I knew something suspicious was going on earlier. So, what's his name? Jaden? Jaden Thompson, I added as an afterthought. He thinks we're destined to be together. My mom laughed at this. Oh, in that case, I definitely have to meet him. And what do you think? Do you think the two of you are destined to be together? Ask me again in 6 months? She nodded as if it made perfect sense that I wouldn't fall for someone so quickly. Undoubtedly, she gave me more credit than I deserved. In reality, I planned to put Jaden's story to the test when the ice melted in the spring. That day finally came in April. I had it all planned out by then and pulled the locket out from beneath my pillow. It was the piece of jewelry that I treasured most, a gift from my parents on my 16th birthday. I opened it and my breath caught when I saw the image of my dad and mom smiling back at me. A solitary tear escaped and I wiped it away and forced myself to take a deep breath. I had thought about this for 6 months. So why was it so hard? I should have been ready, but if I was honest with myself, I wasn't. Even so, I followed the path that Jaden and I had taken countless times since our first trip to Glass Lake. Despite the cold, There was something magical about it, and I couldn't help but feel drawn to it. Well, to it and to Jaden. I didn't doubt for a second everything Jaden had told me. Not anymore. As I neared the water's edge and stared into the eyes of my reflection, I realized how pointless my test was. If I believed Jaden, and I did, then I already knew what my future held. Unlike Noya, I didn't have to let go of my past to know. As if my thoughts had summoned him, I felt a reassuring hand grip my shoulder. I turned and looked into Jaden's warm brown eyes, and a sense of relief came over me. I clutched the locket protectively against my chest and knew exactly whose picture I would put on the other side. I stepped into Jaden, letting my head rest against his shoulder, and I felt his arms enclose protectively around me. I understand if you don't want to try it. I couldn't ask you to give up anything, even for me. I pulled back, my face only inches from his. It's not what you think. I realized that I don't have to give anything up. I already know what my future holds, and it's you. Jaden stooped down, taking my chin in his hands and brushing his lips lightly against my own. Gray Dawson, you don't know how long I've waited for you to say those words. Well, I said hoarsely, favoring the familiar scent of his aftershave. I hope it was worth the wait. Every minute of it.